pleasure to welcome you to the first of 5 presentations designed particularly for freshmen and other students new to the college. Before presenting Speaker of the Morning, I'd like to say a word about this series to you. This college, I suppose as size of colleges go, is one of the larger in the country. Within the state, it's third largest of some 30 colleges, universities. This difference in size between the size of the college and the size of some of the high schools from which you come counts, we think, for some of the academic difficulties you are likely to face this quarter particularly and in your first year. There's a great deal you need to know about the college, and you need to know it before it's too late. Consequently, we've planned this series for you. Now, it's true that you have at your disposal bulletins, catalogs, handbooks of various kinds. These do a pretty good job as they go, but we think they don't communicate fully the spirit and comprehensiveness of the total program as well as we can in these meetings before you. So we expect you to come and hear the rest of the story at these next meetings, the 4 following this one. Next week, I think you'll be interested particularly in the session. We've invited 5 of our outstanding faculty to address your group on the topic, what the faculty expects of students. Now, you read in your summer reading program, a number of articles which people tried to address themselves to this issue. Come next week and see what our local people have to say about this same topic. The professors involved are Professor Sutton from English, Professor Bennett teaches psychology, Professors Easton and Burns from the art department, and Dean Robert Bell, who teaches in the business area and is also Dean of the Division of Fine and Applied Arts. Dr. Diedrich of the English department will moderate that group. I think you'll find it very interesting and stimulating, and it will help some of you who sometimes get into this position about the end of the quarter that, well, I wish I knew what the instructor expected earlier in the quarter. Come next week to this session. I'd like to explain the schedule a little bit to you. You may have wondered why we had them at different hours. For a long time, this college operated on a 4-hour course program. And when we did, we met 4 days a week and skipped a day. So there developed a pattern of what we called float hours. 8 o'clocks on Monday, and 9 o'clocks on Tuesday, and 10 o'clocks on Wednesday, and 11 o'clocks on Thursday, and so on. Those classes did not meet. We've moved past that, but still some of us cling to the old ways, and so we've patterned this program this week and the weeks following on the idea that some of you will have 4-hour classes and that you will be available to attend one of the 3 sessions as they're scheduled. So they are scheduled at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, 10 o'clock on Wednesday, and this hour as you're meeting today. Thought I needed to make that kind of presentation. Another part of your readings for the summer in the book Introduction to College Life dealt with the question, what is the purpose of higher education? What can college do for me? It is in the context of these questions that I'd like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Burkhart is Vice President in charge of Instructional Affairs. In this role, he has the dual responsibility of providing the highest level of instruction from this faculty. At the same time, he has a responsibility of exacting from you the highest level of performance of which you are capable. In your 4 years here, you'll find him a very understanding person. He will expect the best of you always, and you will always get from him the deepest understanding. This fall, he starts his 12th year as Dean of Faculties. He came to this high post of leadership from an illustrious background of scholarly work and student work at a number of colleges. I won't go into it in full detail, except to mention the fact that as an undergraduate, starting a program as you are starting this week, he achieved the highest academic honor that an undergraduate can achieve, election to Phi Beta Kappa at his school, Knox College. He has received 2 master's degrees and a doctorate from Harvard University, and has been on the staff as a professor of education and as a professor of social science at Syracuse University. Here at Ball State, he has taught courses for freshmen, for juniors, and for graduate students. Now, some of you may get to know him much more personally than others in the time that you are here, and if you do, you will find that he has quite a reputation on the tennis courts around Ball State, at Prairie Creek Reservoir for his fine sailing skill. He's a good photographer. But above all, for our concerns here, he's dedicated to the task of setting a high standard of excellence for students and faculty in every aspect of college life. It's a real pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Burkhart, who will speak on the topic, What College Can Do for You. Dr. Burkhart.
Thank you very much, Dean Lawhead, for that fine introduction. I suppose I should say that it's easy to establish a reputation for sailing if you have a good boat. It's easy to establish a reputation in a college if you have a good faculty. And we do have a very good faculty, and I'm proud to be part of it. And I think as you come to know them, you'll be proud to be associated with people in this college. Dean Lawhead has already told you some of the reasons why we've set up these meetings. You remember about 2 Sundays ago at the freshman convocation on the football field, President Emmons told you and your parents that it's our very real hope that you find college interesting, rewarding, stimulating, and as a result of these discoveries, you'll become a successful freshman, and following this, a successful sophomore, junior, senior, a successful graduate of Ball State Teachers College. Now, in order to protect our hopes for you, we've developed this program of Introduction to College. Part of this you've already experienced. I refer first to the 2 days that you were here during the summer, to the activities on Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening when you attended a lecture and participated in a seminar discussion on that lecture. And there are 2 features then of our Introduction to College program which remain. One of these is the series of lectures which I have the privilege to participate in, and the other is your opportunity to come to know a member of the faculty as a friend and a counselor. And as early as the directory is available and the faculty know how to find your addresses, they will be getting in touch with you. As a matter of fact, you're supposed to know who your faculty counselor is, and it might be real nice for you to introduce yourself even before he or she has a chance to find you. Sometime during the year, I hope we'll be trying to evaluate this program of helping freshmen get a good start in college. And we could be asking a representative number of you what you think about it. You see, this is the first year that we've used this particular series of procedures for working with freshmen. For 15 or 20 years in the past, we've done it rather differently. So we're quite interested to know what your reactions will be. And if you keep a diary, maybe it would be helpful to jot down what your reactions are to the Sunday night seminars, the 6 lectures that you're going to hear. My assignment today is to begin this series of lectures, and I hope they'll be specific enough to have some very pointed meaning for you. In the little book, Introduction to College Life, there is an article on what college can do for you, and I hope you've read it. In this article, I tried to point out that in college you can prepare yourself for a vocation. You can prepare yourself for a richer, fuller, more meaningful life through what you gain from general studies, liberal or general education as we call it. And third, you can strengthen a value pattern, a frame of reference for which you've already built a foundation in your family, in your church, and in your school. A frame of reference which will give you a perspective through which you can view the world and see your place in it and your purpose in it. But I said in this article, and I should say again, that college can do these three things for you only to the extent that you step up to the opportunities which we've tried to prepare for you and take advantage of them. Now, all that's not bad as general advice. I think you've heard some of it before. And I'd like in the few minutes that I have this morning to be a little more specific. Today I want to talk about ideas. What is it that college can do for you? Well, this morning I propose that college can teach you to work with ideas. There's a very interesting definition of an educated person that I'd like to present at this time. We hope that you will become educated persons to an even greater extent than you are now. This is what we hope college will do for you, make you an educated person. The definition of an educated person is that he's an individual who can entertain himself. And secondly, he's an individual who can entertain his friends. And finally, and my cause for using this definition is that an educated person is an individual who can entertain a new idea. Now, it seems to me that here in college, the very thing that we should be doing is teaching the manipulation and examination and weighing and judging and measuring of new ideas. This is an idea. What we ought to be doing is teaching you to pick up an idea and turn it over and weigh it, throw it up in the air, and see what it's all about. See what the several different possibilities are. This is an idea for mathematics. Maybe you thought it was an ice cream cone. I thought of this shape as an ice cream cone for a long time. But it's a lot more than that if you look at it a little longer. In college, it's going to be necessary for you to acquire a number of facts. We can't examine ideas without facts. But a college education isn't the memorization of facts. The facts are all available in the dictionaries, in the logarithmic tables, in the encyclopedias. And I suppose the very first thing a person ought to do is to find out where these facts are and how to get to them quickly and efficiently. But our main task, the real purpose of a college education, is to become competent in the examination of ideas. Now, I don't even want you to think that I'm saying that you should memorize ideas. I'm really saying that I hope you can look at them critically and weigh them and analyze them. Now, let me try to be even more specific about this. Sunday night, 2 weeks ago, all of you heard a professor talk about a book that you'd read, and some of you were here in this room and heard Professor McGibbon talk about a separate piece, the book by John Knowles. And I'm sure that those of you who are here remember that Professor McGibbon pointed out that Mr. Knowles was interested in several things, one of which was to tell a story, but telling the story in itself was not the important purpose he had in setting these words to paper. He was really using this story as a vehicle to convey a larger idea, to give his impression of what the world was all about, and to get us as readers to think about the message that he hoped the book would convey. Now, some of you have had the good fortune to be in high schools where you've already learned this, where you already are acquainted with the idea that an author, particularly an author of a work of fiction, is writing to his public on at least two levels. One in which he tells the story about boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. This is the skeleton of the story. But around that skeleton, the author builds a body, an idea, which is more than what appears on the surface. For you, this, of course, then will not be a new idea, but there may be some of you who are in that audience who hadn't really thought of a novel in this way before. And if you heard what Professor McGibbon said, I hope now you have acquired a new idea. And the next time you pick up a work of fiction, you'll read it with added meaning. Maybe you'll recall that Professor McGibbon did not tell the audience assembled exactly what the main idea of the book was. But I thought, sitting listening to him, that you could figure out that this was a book, the author of which was saying, young people don't want to grow up. Adolescents don't want to become adults. They don't want to have to stand alone. In fact, as you look around in the world, the very sad truth seems to be that some people never do grow up. And there's kind of a struggle between wanting to remain an adolescent and not having to stand alone and passing through this period of life and becoming an adult. A battle, if you like. And whether we make it or whether we don't, each of us has to make his separate peace with the world in which he lives. How many of you read the book, incidentally? Well, now I should ask you at this point, is that what the author really said about people not wanting to grow up? Professor McGibbon didn't say that. He didn't tell you that that was the idea. It may be that as you listen to me give you my version of it, you think I just made it up. And maybe I did. Now, because I'm not going to really say for sure what the central theme of the book is, I hope we'll give you an illustration of what I'm talking about when I say that college is a time and a place where you should weigh ideas. Because Mr. Knowles made a statement, Professor McGibbon's made a statement, I made a statement. Now it's still your task to decide what that statement means. Let me see if I can illustrate it by telling a story. I used to think it was a joke. I hope this story, this joke, illustrates how people are thinking, and one person says something and then the other person says something else, and as you follow the dialogue back and forth, you see one idea and another idea, and this is what you're supposed to do in college. As a professor presents an idea, you're supposed to listen to it and respond, and then present your own. This particular story has to do with a father and a son, and the father was trying to give the son some advice just before he got married. And he was trying to talk about the idea of cooperation and how important it was to cooperate with the person you married if you ever hope to have a successful marriage. And so the father said to the son, if you're going to succeed in marriage, you have to do some of the things that your wife wants you to do. For example, if she wants to go to the movies, go to the movies with her. All right. If your wife wants you to wash the dishes, you wash the dishes with her. The son said, all right. But he said, Dad, suppose she wants me to mop the floor. Now, this is all there is to the story, and it's supposed to be funny right here. If she wants to go to the movies, you go to the movies with her. If she wants you to wash the dishes, you wash the dishes with her. If she wants you to mop the floor, good. Best audience I've had this week. Best audience I've had this week. So you're thinking right along with me, and you figured it out. All right, now this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to stay awake during a lecture and think along with the professor and come to the conclusions that the logic takes you to. Well, let me approach the subject from a little different way. About 1/5 of you read this book, a separate piece, so it really isn't fair for me to use that as an illustration if I'm going to reach all of us. So let me give you another example. Let me insert a small lecture right here, which has some ideas in it. See if I can illustrate what I'm talking about. And I call this little lecture, College, Sacred and Profane. And the ideas that I'd like to present to go something like this. I'd like to propose for your consideration this morning that college is a sacred place. Sacred like holy, sacred like religious, sacred like something special. And I assert, and if I had some time I think I could support it, that our history and our tradition would make it possible for me to prove that everywhere in the world, and at any time that we have any record of, knowledge and learning have been respected, venerated, thought of as sacred, special, or holy. Now, it's true that from time to time and in place to place, the degree of this respect varies, but it's nonetheless true. This seems to be a fundamental belief of mankind. Now, you can see this in stories about ancient Chinese civilization, which is probably one of the longest, most continuous that we have any information about. And here, the most important man in the whole society was the scholar. You can see it in the history of the Jewish people, where the rabbi, the one who is learned, is thought of as the really most sacred and precious person in the community. Some of you know the Greek story about Prometheus. And you recall his punishment was that he gave knowledge to ordinary people. You know it from your stories and television movies you've seen of the American Indians. The medicine man is a more important person in the tribe than even the chief, because he knows things that nobody else in the tribe knows. Well, I could give some other illustrations, but let me just sum it up by saying that knowledge and he who possesses it are sacred, special, holy. And it seems to me then that it follows that a college, which is obviously a reservoir of knowledge, a depository of knowledge, is something that's respected, something that's venerated, something that's sacred. You can see this in another way. If you look at people who are outside of something that's holy or sacred, they tend to fear it or dislike it. And there are some people who haven't had the benefit of a college education who dislike college, who fear it. And so they call people in college names like theoretical, like egghead, like unrealistic. And these are ways in which they express their fear and distrust and dislike of college and of education. If you look at the people inside a college, you can see some parallels between college and things that are holy and sacred. You know, when the bell rings, why we march to class. And although we don't move along in the cadence that the monks did in the old monasteries, nevertheless they moved from one part of the monastery to another on the hour in order to follow their religious schedule. And ours isn't so very different. Of course, we look more like a monastery, more like a religious order at the commencement time, when we all dress up in academic regalia, than at any other time in the year. And I recall when I graduated from college, the president summed up the whole affair as he stood before us and he said, "I now admit you to the company of educated men and women." And he meant by that to suggest that this was really pretty important, pretty special. And I think it still has meaning, because not everybody graduates from college, not everybody even comes to college. And so if you do graduate from college, you are an elect group a special group, a separate group, just as though you were joining a church or some small special organization. Well, now, if you've been thinking along with me, like mopping the floor, probably you've been thinking of some ways in which the college is sacred that I haven't mentioned. You've been in classes almost a week now. Did you ever think about the college professor as a priest or a minister? Well, you can make some of your own parallels. Let me hurry on. Let me turn this over now. I had two adjectives in my title. The college is sacred and the college is profane. What am I talking about when I say the college is profane? Well, first, I'm sure it's necessary that you understand how I'm using this word, and so you're listening to it the way I'm saying it. Profane is sometimes thought of as profanity, and that means using the wrong words in the wrong places. But that isn't the main or even the original definition of the word profane. Profane comes from two words, pro meaning outside and fane meaning outside the temple. And anything that's outside of the temple then is not special. It's ordinary, it's common, instead of being something that's reserved and holy and sacred. You can find this in music if any of you are musicians. Some of the authors, like Bach and Beethoven, Brahms, wrote sacred music and they wrote profane music. And by this they didn't mean words that weren't acceptable. They merely meant that in the sacred music they were writing things like a mass for a church. And by profane music they meant that the music they were preparing was not designed for religious purposes, but was designed for common, ordinary, everyday purposes. Now, if you look at the person sitting next to you, I think it'll be quickly clear that this is not a religious ceremony this morning. Women aren't wearing hats or veils. Most of the men are not wearing ties. I can't see whether or not anybody's shoes are shined. But it's pretty obvious that this is an ordinary day. This is an ordinary occasion. It's not a sacred occasion. Another illustration. Pretty obvious that this is a state-supported college. And if it's a state-supported college, then of course it can't be sacred. Because everybody here knows that the church and the state are separated in the United States. And we can't ever be a religious group. So if we can't be special, if we can't be sacred, we've got to be profane. We've got to be common. We've got to be ordinary. I told you about the notion of sacred as being associated with a small group. The paper this morning says there are almost 3,000 freshmen. Ball State Teachers College this year, there are about 9,000 students altogether. It's a little hard to see how 9,000 can be a small group. A special group, a reserved group. It's much easier to think of it as being for everybody, and therefore, in this sense, profane. While it's not true in fact, most people in our society think that everybody goes to college, and anything that everybody does is not sacred. All right, that's the end of the little lecture that I tried to put in. Now, what do you suppose I was doing besides amusing myself? I hope that I was presenting some ideas in little different terms than you've been used to thinking of them. I hope I was taking something that was very familiar. After all, you had a picture in your mind about what college was. You wouldn't have come if you didn't have some idea. But I bet of all the imagination that you had, of all the visions that you had about college, you never thought about college as sacred when you came. And when I say that college is a place where you're supposed to work with ideas, it's just this sort of thing that I'm trying to illustrate. I'm trying to say that when you look at something that you've seen many, many times, and then suddenly you look at it differently, you get a different view, and you get a deeper understanding. So if I had another level of meaning, the same as I said John Knowles had in his little book, perhaps one idea that I hope that you'd get is that there's probably a great deal more to most people, a great deal more to most situations, to most institutions, than we can see the very first time we look at them. There's another idea that I think is inherent in what I tried to say, and that is that there's probably something special, something holy, something sacred about each one of us, if you just knew how to look at it. And at the same time, in each one of us is something that's really quite ordinary, quite common, quite profane, to use this word as I've used it. Let me try once more to get that idea across, because if you come at it from several different directions, you can perhaps convey a notion. Another story, if I may. This is a story about the young fellow who was growing up, and he had a neighbor who was a little older than he was. And the older neighbor enjoyed watching the young fellow grow up and used to talk to him from time to time. And about the time he graduated from high school, the older man got talking with a boy about his father. And the boy, after some prodding, said, "Well, you know, I think my dad's one of the finest people I know. I wouldn't ask for a better dad, but he's really not very bright. There are just so many things he doesn't know." And the neighbor accepted this and didn't say much about it. And in the course of growing up, the young fellow went to college, and as he came back, he talked with his neighbor, and about the time he graduated from college, they again got into a discussion about the boy's father. And the boy told his older neighbor, "It's a very strange thing. I just wouldn't have believed it. But my father's learned so much in the last 4 years, he's just a different person." Small laughter. Okay. Well, the point of telling you this story is that the boy was looking at something familiar, but he was looking at it from a different perspective. And it's quite obvious who changed. The boy changed. And that's what we hope is going to happen to you, because education means changing. We're going to ask you to look at a number of things that are very familiar in college, but we're going to ask you to look at them with a little different point of view. Now, for instance, most of you have studied American history 3 or 4 times. Elementary school, junior high, senior high. You've crossed the Atlantic Ocean with Columbus. How many times? Some of you will choose American history, and you'll hear about Columbus again. But looking at American history a little differently, we hope that your instructors will lead you to examine some new ideas about American history, about the country in which we live, and the ideas that support it. It's your job then, as a student, to listen to your professors, to try to identify some new ways of thinking, and to learn to recognize new ideas when they're presented. And more important than this, to seek the support and the logic for the ideas that are presented. Because some of the ideas that are presented are going to be outrageous, just absolutely nutty. Just one that I'd given you this morning about the college being a holy place. That's nutty. It's particularly nutty if you just take that one statement that I made, take it out of context. But if you stayed with me and listened to what I was trying to say about the college being a sacred place, you know the context in which I put it. You read the whole paragraph. And so an idea can't be examined just as a single word. It's got to be examined in the way in which it's presented. Second point is that you ought to learn to recognize the flaws in some of the arguments that are given to support ideas. For example, one of your professors may ask you to read Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. And the real point of this would be to come to understand why the ideas that are presented in the Communist Manifesto are unworkable in the United States today. And you ought to be able to discuss these ideas and learn why. There was a time and a place in the United States, in the world, where people believed in plural marriages. Well, we don't accept those too well in the United States today. Now, why? What are the reasons for this society coming to this conclusion where some other societies came to different conclusions? There is an idea, in fact it's on the laws of the state of Indiana, that young people are entitled to a free public higher education. And yet each of you came to the college this year and you're paying, what is it, $95 a quarter to go to school. So here's a conflict in ideas. Now, what are the arguments that were presented back in the days when this became a law, and what are the arguments that are now used by our legislators that make it so that you have to pay? The apparent contradiction. The reason that I keep talking about this is that in 4 years from now, and some of you it'll be even sooner, you'll be out in the cold, cruel world, and you're going to have to decide for yourselves what's good and what's true and what's beautiful. And you won't have any professors or teachers or parents to really tell you what to think. College offers you the last formal opportunity that you'll have to participate in a guided discussion, in a great conversation about what the world is all about what your place is in it, the purpose of your existence and of mine. Of course, college isn't going to be very successful, and I think I've said this before, but let me say it again to underline. It's not going to be very successful if you try to memorize what we tell you, if you try to memorize the ideas that your professors give you. Most of you have 3, 4, 5 professors already. And perhaps you've learned already that Professor A does not agree with Professor B. Professor A may think that, let's say the teacher education is the best thing that could happen to any college institution, and that those people who are going to be teachers are the very finest students that we have. And Professor B could take the exact opposite position. And so what are you going to believe? They're looking at the same thing in a little different way. And you'll have to recognize that different people look at the same thing in different ways. I think I have time for just one more story. You know the story about looking at things in a different way, the story about the psychiatrist. We looked at his watch and he discovered that it was about 4:30 and he had 3 patients in the outer office, so he decided to take all 3 of them at once and see who really needed help. So he called them in and sat them down, and he said to the first one, he held up his hand like this, and he says, "What does this mean to you?" And the first man says, "Well, that means baseball." The psychiatrist had never thought of that before, but he said, "All right, now tell me, why does this say baseball to you?" The man says, "Very simple. Where I grew up, we had a baseball team in our town, but our family didn't have very much money, so I could never buy a ticket to get in. But in the left outfield fence, there was a knothole. And if we timed it just right, we could get out there and watch most of the game through that knothole." It seemed like a reasonable sort of statement to make. This man was in tune with reality, so he turned to the second fellow and he said, "All right, now, what does this thing mean to you?" And the second man quickly said, "Rain." Baseball, rain. How do you get rain out of that? Well, the man said, "I came from a poor family too. In fact, there were a lot of us in the family, and I had to sleep in the attic. We were poor, didn't have a very good roof on the house, and so every night it rained, I'd get my face wet. There was a hole in the roof, just about that size. So every time somebody does this to me, I think about rain." The psychiatrist turned to the third man who was there, and he said, "All right, what does this mean to you?" And without wasting any time at all, the man said, "Thursday." "Thursday? How do you get Thursday out of that?" He says, "Very simple. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday." Okay? You get 3 people looking at the same symbol, and they come up with 3 different points of view. You're going to have 3 professors who are looking at you, and they're going to have 3 different pictures. You have 3 professors who are talking about the same subject, and they're going to give you 3 different ideas. And it's your task to be able to pick up this idea, these set of ideas that they have, and turn them over and weigh them and look at them differently and decide for yourself what this thing actually means. What is this idea? What are you going to believe about it? Are you going to believe it's an ice cream cone? Are you going to believe it's something to be hung in a gallery as an exhibit of modern art? Should it be hung in your room so it'll sway in the wind? What is the idea? And the only person who can really decide, of course, is you. And so the exercises we put you through in the 4 years that we have here are exercises which we hope will teach you to recognize a new idea, to examine it critically, and determine what you're going to think about it. What can college do for you? Well, college can be a place where you learn real independence, the only independence that matters, and that is freedom to think for yourself instead of to accept what other people tell you to think. It's here in college we can acquire intellectual freedom. It's here in college you can learn where ideas come from, how they've been accepted or rejected by mankind across history. You can learn what to believe about yourself and about the universe in which you live. Because all too soon, you'll be on your own 2 feet, and we hope then you'll be able to handle the new ideas that are presented to you as an adult in the many years that you'll be living without the protection of being a student at Ball State Teachers College. Thank you for being such an attentive audience.
Thank you, Dean Burkhart. I'm sure if we see our responsibility in instruction, see the core of it as this matter of bringing students in confrontation with ideas, just this single notion of looking for the sacred and the profane in all of our experience would be a worthy goal for the rest of these 4 years for you. Before adjourning today, I'd like to call your attention to one of the documents given to you as you came in the back door. This is the convocation schedule. You've heard here that it's important as part of college education to open yourselves to new ideas. We're likely to see college life in a duality of courses and extracurricular activities, and I think part of gaining this perspective that was talked about is seeing the totality of experience. The convocations represent one area of bringing us back to reality and seeing the perspective. Very easy on a college campus to remove ourselves from newspapers and the radio and the comments from home, this type of thing, and live in a bit of a dream world. Convocation speakers brought here will get you out of that to some degree. Let's consider, for example, just 2 or 3 of the crazy ideas. Maybe they're sacred, maybe they're profane, I don't know, but of some of the men listed on that convocation schedule. Ashley Montague, the anthropologist, will come here with ideas such as these. He's written about them, some of you have read about them. For example, he has a nutty idea, to use the dean's term here, that there's a natural superiority of women. Now, at least half of us here know this is a profane idea. Maybe the other half does not, and I'm not going to identify which half I'm talking about. But he has the idea that women are naturally superior to men. If he comes here, corner him, find out why, if he doesn't say so from this lectern. Another crazy idea he has is that the idea of cooperation in life is more important than competition. Now, all of us here knows this is heresy. We've heard all the time that competition is a thing that keeps us going. Here's a man who's going to present to you a different idea, that living in concert with other people is really a basic characteristic of life. Or take Mr. Comminger, who's coming here today, the historian, or coming this year, the historian. He has the idea that we ought not to be offering these burlesques, which we offer on Friday night in all the gymnasia across Middle West, particularly in the country. He said we wouldn't think of putting our young daughters, 16 and 17 years old out to cabarets at night to entertain, but we do this with the young men. We put them on a basketball floor to entertain the adult populace. Now, these are two men with some ideas. There are many others on the list. Look at them, mark your calendar, and be sure to take part in this other facet of college life. We expect to see you next week. Thank you.